Well, greetings, everybody. Welcome once again to the RecPoker podcast. I'm your host, Steve Fredlund, and we are on episode 152. And today we're going to bring you an interview that we had with Tommy Angelo and Lee Jones from PokerSimple. And I think you're going to enjoy that. Just a couple of quick announcements. As always, thanks to our sponsor, Running Aces. They are our official sponsor. They've been there since the beginning. Thanks to them. And their players of the week this week, Tim Ross with a nice 38 points, Jay Brousseau, Rick Keister, and I somehow got in there again, fourth place, even though I didn't play the last half of the week. I managed to hang in there with a good start to the week, and I got fourth place. A couple of things coming up. The first thing, please mark your calendars. Come to it if you can, if you're around Minnesota. Next Monday night, October 28th, we are doing our first meet and greet. We're doing it at the Oedipals, that is Oedipals, the brewing company in Minneapolis. We got all the information out on the website, but we're going to start gathering around 5:30. We're going to do a recording of the podcast from 6 to about 7 o'clock, and then we're just going to hang out, watch some Monday Night Football. If you're a member of our community, you'll get buy one, get one on your first round. And so just going to kind of hang out and get to know everybody and just spend some time together. So that's next Monday, October 28th. Before that, on Wednesday night, October 23rd, we have Chapter 4 of our book study. We're going through Andrew Brokos's book, Playing Optimal Poker. That starts at 6:30 p.m. Central Time. So if you want to be a part of that and you're a member, the information is in the membership area. Otherwise, just reach out to me, and you can watch the recording later as a member as well. NFL Survivor Pool, down to 10 people. Still kind of hanging out there, 10 people left, so it's getting real now. You should jump on the Discord channel if you want to hang out and chat with us about hand histories. We've been doing a phenomenal job of railing each other in tournaments. Had a lot of success with RecPoker Nation, and it's fun to be out there celebrating each other's victories. So get on Discord. That's free, open to the public. If you want to become a member, you can have a 30-day free trial. Check that out. Both of those links are available at rec.poker. So just go out there. It's got all the information. You can also sign up for our weekly newsletter. Get the This Week in RecPoker, which I call twerp. So check that out and just stay plugged in through Facebook, Twitter, or through the podcast. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, and you are now going to hear the interview that we did with Tommy Angelo and Lee Jones. All right, everybody. Well, as promised, we are here with Lee Jones and Tommy Angelo, PokerSimple, among other things. Guys, first of all, thanks for jumping on the show, and tell us a little bit about where you're calling in from.
We are in lovely Oakland, California.
Oakland, California.
Yeah, so we're right across the bay from San Francisco, which you would be able to see out that window.
If we had the lines open.
Right.
Nice.
And Lee lives in, we live on the Berkeley-Oakland border. Berkeley is a city and a university.
And a universe.
Right. And so Lee lives like 5 minutes away. So this has really worked out that we live so close together and we're making these videos. So we make the videos right here in my house. We put a backdrop up and we got a camera. There's more time. And it's going to slide up. And yeah, we're just it's just really uncanny how well it worked out. Lee was living in Nashville when we first cooked this idea up. And then since then he moved back to the Bay Area, which is where Lee used to live, and that's when we met.
Okay. Nice. Well, we appreciate you guys coming on. I mean, I know, Tommy, you've been on the show before. We ended up having a great conversation, a two-part sort of thing. And I know that, it's really hard for you to express yourself. You're very quiet. You're very subdued. so I'm hoping that Lee will actually bring a little more energy than you did last time. Well, let's start with just tell us about, this whole idea. I know a lot of people know what PokerSimple is, but a lot of people don't. So why don't you just kind of back us up a little bit, talk about PokerSimple or anything else that you guys got going on?
Well, we've known each other for, I think it's like 15 years now or something like that.
Something.
Then we first met on 2+2. And back when 2+2 was small enough that you could actually meet people there. And we sort of just like bumped into each other. We were both playing Limit Hold'em in the Bay Area. And we were both musicians, and we kind of connected across that. And then we sort of just stayed in touch one way or another. We've played some music together, and we've occasionally talked about doing a poker project together. And it never really happened until really the beginning of this year. And I left PokerStars, and I was thinking that I might be headed out towards the Bay Area. And I said to Tommy, what do you think? Should we do something together? And he was like, well, I could use a cool project. And, we first started talking about it, and it was the first thing that we started talking about looks nothing like what we ultimately ended up doing, which is fine. And we just kept drinking more coffee and having more discussions. and finally this PokerSimple idea just kind of evolved out.
Okay. Give us the 10,000 foot view. What is PokerSimple?
PokerSimple is me and Lee talking about low stakes cash games to cash game fanatics.
Yeah.
That's basically it. And what we do is instead of like going through hands, we go through topics. So like one episode might be, the way we put it is small topics will produce small videos. So one of the ones I think is one of our best ones is called Folding Pocket Jacks Before the Flop. So we talk about just that, right? And we got one that we're going to record tomorrow on, I forgot. Well, we're going to record several tomorrow, but like bankroll. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the topic of bankroll, it's not a topic that it gets written about now and then, but it isn't really discussed specifically for people playing 1-3 and 2-5. How do you manage bankroll when you're just basically maybe going session to session? You got 5 wins going. Do you save that for poker? Do you spend it on the TV? These are like real life issues that come up for real players. And so we're really taking a look at all these different angles of poker. Most of everything we've done so far has been strategy. No.
Yeah.
Like 6 out of 6 have been strategy. Now we're just branching off into some of the other topics.
But I would say that a good description of our audience is serious amateurs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, please don't watch us if you think you're going to crush the Germans.
Just a blanket statement. All Germans.
Right, all Germans. Yeah. The Germans we mean, right? But in general, the thing is that 99.9% of poker players are not playing against the Germans. So we are addressing those players and saying, if you are playing in a 1-2, a 1-3, a 2-5 game, and honestly, some 5-10 games, these are things that we believe can make you improve your results in any of those games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love that. And the premise, you guys basically, you get together, you talk about these topics, then you've just been putting them out on YouTube for free, right? Anybody can grab these things?
Yeah. Yep.
So what's the channel? Is it a PokerSimple channel, or what's the channel on YouTube?
It's a YouTube channel called PokerSimple. And if you search for PokerSimple, one word, and either one of our names, you'll get there right away.
Yeah.
I guess it's hard to describe it. It's sort of like describing a movie. It's like you can talk about the plot and everything, but once you watch 5 minutes of the movie, you got a real good sense of what's going on.
Yeah, you'll figure out what we're up to.
Yeah, and that's kind of how these are. One thing we learned is that at the beginning we were recording them, and we record, and we were getting overly scripted. We'd have this nice outline of material. Oh yeah, we want to say this. You say this. You say this. And what we learned painfully was that we are not actors at all. We did the editing. We edited it all down. We showed it to our wives, and they said, "You may not release this on the internet." Yeah, this cannot leave the building, is the way my wife put it. Right. And so what we learned was the very, very first shoot we did was Lee came over. We sat his phone on the table, and he had a hand he had just played, 9-8 of clubs, and we just talked about this hand, and it was so spontaneous. And I was like, at one point, I was like, how could you play so bad? You made this terrible. It was really funny conversation, right? But it was really lively and authentic. And then what we realized is that's the way we do our videos, is we figure out our topic, we figure out a couple bullet points, and then we just roll tape and we talk. And so spontaneous stuff comes up during the conversation. And it's just a really lively way to attack some of these topics. And then in the editing room, we can cut all the minutes of blah, blah that made no sense whatsoever. And we end up with a pretty tight video that's like 8 to 10 minutes long.
So I like that you said it was a really fun conversation when Lee comes over and he says, here's how I played 9-8 of clubs. And you say, how can you play so terrible? So from your perspective, it sounds like a really fun conversation. I'm not so sure from Lee's perspective. It was a fun conversation.
I've butchered plenty of hands in the past.
Exactly.
I'll butcher hands in the future. It's like if this was one hand that I butchered, it's like one of many.
Right. Yeah, that's. I actually had an episode that I just called Steve Butcher's King Jack of Spades or something like that. So
Exactly.
And I think that's how you learn, right? That's how you learn. Sort of, have that dialogue around it and just be authentic, be open, and say we all make mistakes, but here's what I was thinking. And I think Rob maybe has something to ask here.
Sure.
No, I don't have anything to ask. I've watched all the videos so far. There's 6 of them, 6 episodes so far.
Yep.
So I subscribed, I liked, I did all those things you wanted us to do.
Good job. Thank you.
Yeah. Super.
They're really fun to watch. I mean, the way you guys interact, I think is really, really awesome.
Good. Cool. Well, it actually reminds me a lot of you guys. I mean, it really is. It's kind of like we're in this together to learn.
Yeah. Yep.
We're all working together, right, to help. And so a lot of the stuff we throw out there, it isn't like, hey, you should go do this and you're going to make money. It's like, hey, if this is a problem you have, try this. Maybe it'll help.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we keep hearing from all the different people that we interview is, one of the great ways you can learn is learn in the context of community, wrestle with it, talk about it, have the discussion, be open and authentic about it. And that's what you guys are doing. And I think, Rob is one of our stalwarts here. And I think, his endorsement goes a long way for all of RecPoker Nation. So I would say, if Rob thinks it's good, all of RecPoker Nation should be liking and subscribing. Because what Rob says kind of goes.
Subscribe. Yeah.
What Rob says kind of goes in Recpoker Nation.
Right.
That's
you're like the second fiddle to Rob. Is that?
Oh my God! No, I'm not. There is no second fiddle to Rob. Well, let's talk a little bit about. I want to get into a little bit of strategy, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And I know you guys are generally talking about low stakes cash games. We're generally talking about live tournament play, lower buy-ins. Obviously they're different, but there's similarities. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we've been talking about a bit this month is, playing small pairs, playing mid pairs from early and middle position. Mm-hmm. And obviously that changes a bit in tournaments because your stack size changes throughout the course of a tournament. But I'm just going to kind of throw that out there as a wide open topic. I know that's super wide. It's, it's several weeks of conversation, but just from your perspective, like what are some of the things that as recreational players, or I forget what the term is that you used for sort of serious amateurs, how should we be thinking about those things in general principles type of terms?
You first? Me first? Okay. It's all about stack size. Okay?
I was going to say that.
Hey, cool. I got it right. It's all about stack size. Basically, I don't play a lot of tournaments, but I watch a lot of tournament poker, and I see people that are playing tournaments. And the thing about small pairs is that they are really valuable if they are getting the right price to flop a set. Okay? And the problem is that if you're trying to play them in early position and you see people limping in with their pocket sixes or whatever, and then there's a raise, and now it's come back around and they're having to call a raise. If you're playing in a cash game and everybody's on 100 or 150, 200 blinds, that's fine. Because you're getting the right price you have the right implied odds to try to spike a six. But quite often in a tournament, maybe you start off with 100 blinds, but very quickly, particularly in the lower stakes tournaments, you're down to 50 or 40 or 30 blinds, and you just are not getting the right price to call a raise and try to flop a set of sixes. And I see people all the time bleeding off significant portions of their stack. So for instance, let's say that you have 30 blinds and you call and you limp in for one blind, and then somebody raises to 3 big blinds and now you call. Well, you've just invested 10% of your stack trying to spike a six. And you can't afford to do that. That's just an investment that you can't make when you're on 30 blinds.
But with 60 it would be.
If you had 60 blinds, it would be a different situation. Or if you were in late position and you could be, let's say, virtually sure that you were going to see a flop for that price, or you were completing the small blind for half a blind or whatever it is, right?
Right.
That would be fine. But I see people that it's like, well, if I fold here and then a 6 comes up on the flop, I'm going to hate my life.
Right, and that's what it is. Yeah, I think it's FOMO. I think it's regret. I think that's what people are doing it for because.
And that's just
last time I folded 6s and a 6 came. Yeah.
Right, and that's just the price that you pay for having 30 blinds and being in early position that you just can't limp in with your 6s and see what happens.
And I know there's a lot of it depends sort of involved, like how many players in the pod and the effective stack sizes of everybody. But do you have sort of a general guideline of where that changeover? You kind of mentioned 30 and 60, but is there sort of a guideline? Yeah, Tommy can do that kind of a guideline. I feel like there's sort of this middle piece. Like when you're really deep, you play it for set value, you play it for implied odds. When you're really shallow, you're 7 big blinds, you just shove your pocket 6s. And then there's sort of this middle range where it's sort of, it depends, and maybe it's not worth it, maybe it is. Talk a little bit about sort of where those crossover points are.
Well, I mean, I'm going to have cash games in mind, but generally speaking, the numbers I use with my clients is 10-1 and 15-1 as the minimum, meaning you need 10-1 minimum stack, implied odds to the bet ratio to play your sets when you know you're going to be last to act the whole hand for sure, and 15-1 minimum when you're going to be out of position because the value is just less, right? So that kind of speaks to that quasi zone. In tournaments, my tendency is to be extra conservative though. If I'm in that 30 to 60 range, I don't want to do any of that bleeding. Okay, so the only time I would play the 6s in those situations, and this is kind of speaks to another point I want to bring up, is so far we've been talking about set mining, which implies you're going to hit a 6 or fold. Of course, there's always the 5-4-3 flop, which we didn't plan on, right? I mean, there's other things that happen.
Yes.
But generally speaking, I have a very clear mind, depending on the opponent, of not set mining, of playing my hand for value deep into the hand. And by that I mean, let's say I limp with 6s and I get raised from behind, okay, and I call. And it's a loose aggressive player who has a very wide range and a very high c-betting percentage, okay? And the flop comes ace, 3, deuce. I might bet out there. I might check raise there. I might check call the flop and donk the turn there with my pocket 6s. In other words, just because I played the hand doesn't mean I'm always set mining. Okay, so that is a big factor of me of whether or not I play the hand is, am I willing to get aggressive with this hand unimproved against this opponent? So I imagine that comes in tournaments big time.
Well,
absolutely.
We have to be a little careful there because if you're sitting on 20 or 25 or 30 big blinds, by the time you do something like check raise the flop or something like that, he's going to shrug, call his ace queen.
Well, what about 60 big blinds? That's a good number to be talking about. Is that in the in-between zone you're talking about? Well, because when you're down in 20 or 30, you can just jam before the flop if you want, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think when you're talking about with Tommy, with playing it for more than just the set value, that is, I think when you have a deeper stack, right? That's kind of what you're getting at. Is
right. Absolutely
against certain players, you're playing pocket 6s not just for implied odds of hitting a set, but also the fact that their range is wide. Your 6s are going to be good more often. You're actually calling for value, pre-flop more often.
Right.
But yeah, when maybe to Lee's point, when you're down to 20 or 30. That's dicier. That's part of why you just fold them, because it's pretty tough to make a move post flop on those, because if you're wrong on one street, your stack is gone.
Right, which goes back to Lee's initial answer. Stack size is so often determining these things, and whether or not you in your mind are truly set mining or playing for value.
And I will, if you guys are mostly into the live tournament thing. I assume that most of your community are aware of programs such as Snapshove, and you just have to know those numbers, because if you don't, the guy next to you does know them. And there comes a point where, as Tommy was saying, you just rip it in with your 6s, and either you win the pot or you don't. And I see people routinely try to flop sets and stuff when they're on 15 big blinds or something like that, and that's just grossly wrong. So the point is, there comes a point where you're just going to bomb it in with your 6s, And so I guess I would say that there's kind of, you talk about these small to medium pairs, there's 3 different regimes. There's when you're going to shove with number of blinds for your stack size where you're going to shove with them, a stack size where you really have to fold them, and then a stack size where you can think about set mining them or becoming a little creative with them.
Right. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do for sure. I don't know, Chris, Rob, John, do you guys have anything to add to that?
No, just that if you listen to your episode on folding pocket jacks pre-flop, this is all the same things that you were saying about pocket jacks, about middle pair.
Oh, yeah, when you know they have aces, kings, or queens.
Right.
Yeah, but this is a different situation. The pocket jacks episode was about when you have good reason to believe that you're up against a bigger hand.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're also talking a lot about the stack depth that where you could actually set mine, even if somebody does, based on your position. If you feel that you're not going to get 4-bet or you're not going to get, or you're closing the action, if you have enough implied odds because of your stack depth, you could potentially call with those jacks.
Yes.
Yeah, but
or sixes is in this case.
Or
Yes.
sixes.
Right. Yeah. And that's where the similarity, that's where I got that similarity.
Yep. Yeah, we did touch on the same stack size concepts in there.
Yes,
sure.
And you guys mentioned, I'm not sure which one of you, maybe it was Tommy, that a couple of times you referred to, I might limp call there. And one of the things that we continue to get a little bit of mixed signals on from different people that we have on the show, and that's why it's good. That's why it's good to have different perspectives, is this idea of having a limping strategy. And so, I think some people we've had on to say, if you're first to enter the pot, you should never be limping. And others are saying, no, you should have some sort of a limping strategy. Can I infer from what you've said that you guys do have a limping strategy and it might involve these middle pairs?
He does, I don't.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh, well, I've done it both ways.
Let's have a debate.
Yeah, well, not really. It's just time periods. I had phases of my life where I never limped and phases when I did. Okay. And now I have one specific situation for limping, and it has to do with pairs and stack sizes. And that is when if the state of the game is such, or there's players behind me, it's probably going to be a raised pot. Okay. And I want to play a single raised pot with my pocket deuces. But if there were 2 raises, so for an example, let's say we're playing 2-5, and if I limp for 5 and somebody else makes it 20, and I call and I have my, let's say, $300 stack, okay, I'm getting my 15-1 out of position, it's all good, right? But if I open for 15 or 20 and somebody else makes it 70, now I do not have the right odds to set mine. Okay, so I predict if I think there's a decent chance that there's going to be a raise, like some games there's a raise almost every time. That is the only time I limp, so that I can keep the pot small enough to set mine. Period. If it's a normal game with the normal amount of everything going out, I'm playing my normal game, then I will make my normal open with any pocket pair I play. So it's kind of a special case where I'll limp there. And then the fun part is, and we do have an episode called Limp Re-Raising, is that when I do decide to limp with my deuces and somebody makes it 20 and it comes back around, I might re-raise here and bet 100% of the flops to represent aces or kings. So that's always in my backup plan anytime I limp with a low pairs, that I might go ahead and re-raise before the flop and basically try to steal.
Does that imply in that situation that you do have a strong value limping range like aces and kings?
Say that again?
Do you so when you're limping in those situations where you feel fairly likely that you're going to be facing a raise behind, so you're limping with your small to medium pairs that you want to set mine with, does that imply that you also have a frequency, or there's some sort of time where you're actually limping with aces?
Yes,
you're limping with aces there.
And kings sometimes, yes.
So you can honestly represent aces and kings then with your other stuff.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. Does that, and Lee, I want to hear your perspective on that too, but in this category of having a limping strategy, is that also, would you fit in some suited, like some suited connector combos in there too, or is it pretty much strictly pairs that you're doing that with? I guess Tommy, you first.
No.
Strategy.
Okay, I answered that.
Yeah.
No. I don't open. I have the tightest opening range in the world, I believe.
But I mean, your limping strategy with like your pocket twos, pocket sixes. Do you also have suited connectors in as part of your limping strategy?
No, never.
Okay, interesting. Okay, Lee, how about your perspective on Tommy's view of limping, having a limping strategy?
Well, I mean, Tommy's a really good poker player. I'm not going to argue with his.
That's not what you told me off air.
The truth is that there are rare occasions in which I'll limp in, but they might as well be non-existent. So to a first approximation, I have no limping strategy. One of the things that I find is that, and quite often I'm in a situation where I'm saying to somebody else, oh, these are the hands that you might want to play, and here's how to play them, and so on and so forth. Whenever I'm coaching somebody who is new or, inexperienced or, is struggling with the game, I always tell them, never limp in. Always come in for a raise. And one of the main reasons is because that becomes a leak for a lot of people. They use it as an excuse to start playing flop lotto.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
And so I just tell people, by forcing yourself to either fold or raise when you come in, you just shut off what is a massive leak for a lot of people. And it's amazing to me how I can say to people, okay, the one thing you're going to do, I don't care what you do, but do not limp in before the flop. And like 15 minutes later, boom, they're limping in before the flop. There's something about the game that causes people to want to just put in the minimum and see if they hit the flop. So I feel that for most people, it's like, like when you first learn to ski, they tell you to snowplow all the way down the hill, right? Because that way you're not going to face plant. And it turns out that eventually you start doing turns, right? It might be correct to have a limping strategy, but I think for 99% of players, if they would adopt a fold or raise strategy before the flop, they would do way better.
And you're saying it's not just because of the raises, it's because they're not going to limp in with Jack 9 offsuit.
Exactly. Because it shuts off that leak, and I think it will in general cause them to play better.
Right.
That's it. That's an interesting take for sure. So it's the strategy behind the strategy is we're going to try to get you to be more selective in your pre-flop hands.
Yeah. And by the way, you'll be making the correct play.
And, and by the way, you'll be making the correct play because limping there's just rarely any good that comes from it. Right. Unless you really have thought it out. And like in Tommy's situation,
is a rare case.
You're thinking limp raise and here's my pocket pair and I don't want to get shut out of my set mining opportunities and stuff like that. That's not what those people are thinking.
No, No.
Most 99% of poker players are thinking, ooh, maybe if I limp with Jack 9, I'll get a 10-8-7 flop, or I'll get a Jack 9-3 flop, right? But that's hoping. That's not planning.
So in terms of kind of reconciling these two, so Tommy has a specific situation with a specific table dynamic where it makes sense to open limp with some small pairs. And if you're not doing that, if you're deciding to open, to actually raise with those, there's some upsides that come with that. The downside is, once in a while you're going to get re-raised off of a pocket pair. Right. So that's sort of you're giving up that sort of equity piece of now having to fold pocket sixes. But what you're gaining is better hand selection. You're gaining some fold equity. You're able to balance. If you want to raise with your aces, those sorts of things. So
and gaining experience at just playing tough, aggressive poker. That part of it is breaking people out of their
instead of passive, instead of being so passive.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
When I sit down at a poker table and I see a bunch of people limping in, I'm like, good poker game right there.
Oh yeah.
Right. When I see fold, 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 raise, fold, 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 I'm like, table change.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So, and the other thing is, by the way, is that if you get into the habit of, raising your pocket sevens when you come in, like when you flop a set, like you're just betting because you're c-betting, and like that's when you get your stacks because you've built a pot, and there is little that is less rewarding than flopping a set in an unraised pot.
Good point.
Yeah.
Now again, we're talking cash games here, right?
Sure.
And this is all a very different situation than if your community are people that are playing tournaments and they spend 2/3 of the tournament in a 20 to 50 big blind situation. And please don't take any of what we've just said and try to apply it to a 20 to 50 big blind situation.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think, we've been talking about stages of tournament. So a lot of this is applying to sort of the early on stages, but that's where we've had a lot of conversations because people sit down and, everybody's limping. 8 people are seeing every hand when the blinds are 25-50. So it is that sort of situation that this applies to in a lot of ways, but that's a good caveat, folks. We're not talking about having 15 or 20 bigs, and limping in to see a flop. This is a different situation when we're deeper. Chris Jones, did you have something?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to ask the opposite, question, which is a little bit about, and you said, oh, it's great when you sit down at a table and everybody's limping. So what is our approach when we sit down at a table and there's 4 limpers in front of us? Does that give us, do we need to be more aggressive? Do we need to shut all the people out? Or does it give us more permission to try to play that flop lotto and limp ourselves in with our 7-6 suited and see where we land? I mean, how do we approach when we have all these limpers in front of us?
Well, I'll let Tommy answer, but I would ask one question first. Do you flop any better than everybody else does?
No.
In fact, everybody in RecPoker is worse than the average.
I was going to say, you're probably all running below EV.
None of us have ever won with Ace King.
All right, None
of us have ever won with Ace King either.
Yeah.
I'll let Tommy take it from here.
Wait,
Hey, George.
I have a visual aid.
I didn't know you had visual aids.
Oh, yeah, I got a visual aid.
It's a multimedia presentation.
Yeah. It's a multimedia presentation. This is when I limp with drawing hands. That's it. So if I have the 7-6 suited.
That's a dealer button for people listening to the podcast.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
That was a dealer button.
That's my job. I failed. He's holding up a dealer button.
So if I'm in the hijack and 4 people limp and I've got 7-6 suited, I muck. If I'm in the cutoff and 4 people limp and I've got 7-6 suited and I have and the button is giving some indication of non-interest in the hand, I play it. I might limp, I might raise. If I want to give myself every chance of getting the cutoff button out, I raise. It's my routine, is to raise any drawing hand I have in the cutoff. Okay, and then on the button I limp. 100% of the time. 7-6 offsuit, 4 limpers, stacks irrelevant. I am seeing that flop from the button every time.
But to Chris's point, this is not an excuse to widen up and start playing trash and playing flop lotto with everybody else, unless you flop better than everybody else does.
Or unless you're on the button.
Or that's button aside.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the button then, since you brought it up, because clearly you don't flop better if you're on the button, right? That's not a thing. We don't flop better when we're on the button. But obviously you're getting at the power of position, the power to extract value from your opponents. Some people would hear that, and my first reaction was, okay, so you won't limp it in the hijack or cutoff, but you will on the button. That seems, I have some questions about that, but just generally talk about, okay, obviously you have this extreme, you hold the button in very high regard.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. It's
not the button specifically, it's acting last.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So if I know I'm going to act last, the value of that 7-6 is in my mind, in a sense, it's infinitely greater than any other seat. There's the way I put it is there's only 2 positions on every street, last and not last. Whoever's last has an advantage, and everyone else is at a disadvantage on every street for millions of years, however long we play, right? And so the act of being last and not last is such a huge dividing line. And the reason is, give us that, okay, 3 people limp, we call 7-6, and 2 people call behind us. And the flop comes 5-4 king.
Yep.
So one guy's got a king-queen, another guy's got pocket sevens. These are people who are going to get to the turn. Somebody else has ace suited with 1 pair and a backdoor flush draw. And we've got our straight draw, right? And if you play this out over and over and over about the likelihood of you getting there cheaply and getting paid off if you hit your hand, and take that exact scenario and put you on the button against those 4 players with that flop, and you run that 1 million times, it's so night and day difference. And then the other thing that is handed to everyone who's last is the opportunity to just steal the pot sometimes because everybody checked 18.
Right.
And that only goes to the person who acts last. And that is true on that potential is there every single hand. And so to me, the difference between acting last and not acting last is the deciding factor between many of my pre-flop decisions.
Right. So the key point here is that the difference between the button and the cutoff is like an order of magnitude bigger than the difference between the cutoff and the hijack.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's not linear. It's extremely non-linear.
Right. Because from the hijack, there's two people behind you that are going to can come in. That's why looking left from the cutoff is the most important seat to do that. If you have somebody sitting next to you who indicates their intentions before the flop, and you're in the cutoff, and you can get that information, and now you have the 7-6, that information can and should determine whether you play the hand or not.
Yeah, we call that actually promoting your position. You're promoting from cutoff to button because you see the button with his cards, you know, or in a tournament, you know, the tournament break is coming up. You see it all the time, right? The button throws his cards away and runs to the bathroom. Right? Boom, you've got the button now, and now you have that advantage.
If anything I just said is true, it depends on the truth of the is position worth that much more for the 7-6, being last compared to having two people behind you in these 5-way pots. And so, I feel it is, but you know, that's
no. We preach position too, but I think what you articulated there is incredibly powerful. I think that's super helpful. The magnitude piece. If you're not last, you're not. If you're not last, you're not last.
Somebody else is.
Somebody else is, right? Exactly. And so, you know, one of the things that's come up is, you know, I'm thinking about the 7-6 suited on the button where you have the option to limp. Now, let's say you have those 4 limpers in front of you.
And let's just make it offsuit for fun, because I don't think suitedness even matters here. Go ahead.
You know what? That is more fun. I'm going to go with clubs and hearts because I think those are the most fun suits. But you know, this idea of punishing the limpers comes into play. This idea of okay, well, why not raise here? Because you have some fold equity. Then you punish the limpers, and you still have position if you get called. I mean, those are things that have come up as topics of conversation. So, you know, kind of a fill in the blank here. Punishing the limpers is what?
Well, the whole word punish implies that they did something wrong, that they, you know, they're just playing poker. I think that's a kind of a faulty, aggressive, macho attitude to take. Oh, we got to punish them because they play bad. They limped. They must be bad players. I look at it as like, okay, if I know they're bad players because they limped, then I want to keep the pot small and wait till I got something and give them a chance to hang themselves for a lot of money on the turn and river, right?
I guess. That's good. I like that. But what if we think of it as not so much they're bad players, but just, you know, their hands aren't strong enough, so all they could do is limp. So I guess punishing is maybe the wrong word, but we want to kind of put them to the test. We want to apply pressure to the people
one thing to consider is that if you have 7-6, you're not exactly punishing limpers with 7 high, right? I mean, if we think of this from a Sklansky Bucks perspective, like if I have pocket queens and a bunch of people limp and I make the pot bigger, then I'm making money like for every chip they put into the pot right here, right now.
Because you have the best hand.
Because I have the best hand, right? And so whatever happens post-flop, I profit right here, right now with my pocket queens. It's a different situation if I have 7-6 because it's not at all clear who has the most equity going into the flop. And 7-6 probably doesn't have the most equity going into the flop. So there's real value in considering, in thinking about, you know, I mean, that is aside things like, will it enable me to steal the pot on the flop?
Right. Well, that's where the real value comes from. When I do raise with 7-6, it's because I'm setting myself up to see that and you know, likely make money if these guys miss, right? So I believe that the correctness of whether or not to raise or not depends a lot on what your plan is and your willingness is post-flop. So if I'm playing against a bunch of really bad players, who I would just as soon make something first rather than build a pot and then count on C betting, even though it's profitable, as where my profit comes from, right? But there's certainly nothing wrong with that. I mean, you could say, there are times when it could be correct to raise with 7 deuce offsuit and C bet 100% of the time. And against certain fit and fold players at certain times, that will be profitable because they're never going to re-raise you without a big hand and all that, right?
But this is not our recommendation that you do.
Yeah. No. So what I'm saying is those are the factors. It is like, you were saying, what about re-raising?
Yeah.
What about reason? That's a certainly legitimate way to play, but that does require sort of a higher fluctuation, a willingness for more fluctuation after the flop with no hand.
I like that a lot. And I do like what you said about, sort of a macho attitude too of that. So I think it's a good thing to sort of assess, like, why am I raising here? Because I want to punish them for what we think is playing them poorly, or is it actually a strategic decision where I thought through the rest of the hand and I'm willing to take on maybe excessive variance at a time when, maybe I shouldn't be early in the tournament.
And this really comes to style. And I mean, I don't play tournaments at all. If I were playing tournaments, I would certainly play way more aggressive style than I do when I'm playing live cash games.
Yeah, okay.
But I just come to enjoy these situations I used to raise all the time.
Yeah.
Now it's like, okay, I'll see the flop with 7-6.
And just fold if you don't,
Yeah, it's like life has just gotten a little, I hate to say it, simpler.
PokerSimple.
I mean, I think part of that is, again, I tend not to be as, I don't think I play quite as tight as Tommy does up front, but I don't think I play quite as loose as he does in back.
Okay.
Like once a decade, he'll play 6 deuce offsuit on the button. Okay, I just don't.
Right.
Okay, but again, that's once a decade. Let's be clear here. I play ace jack suited if I'm feeling frisky in early position, and he doesn't. Right. So, but the point is that it's really, both of us play very snug, very, very snug up front, and we both loosen up a lot around the back. And I can't overstate this idea of the nonlinearity of the improvement in position as you get close to the button.
I love that. That's a tremendous concept.
Yeah. In fact, when I devised various charts and things, I don't, it used to be everybody talked about early position, middle position, late position. And I just lump all the seats other than the last 3 seats in early position. And what I mean by that is my betting decisions don't change. My opening ranges don't change until the hijack seat at all.
I think I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. But it doesn't matter whether that's right or not. It does make the point that the difference in value of those positions is far less than when you get to the end, like we were saying. Yeah.
Chris, did you have something?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to shift gears since we're talking to cash game specialists and talk a little bit about, I think there's other states like Minnesota out there that have this variant of called 2-100 spread. Mm-hmm. Have you ever played that before?
We played spreads and games like that, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I'm curious because most of the
had spread limit before they figured out how to break through the legal problems for no limit.
Yeah, and so most of the content out there that you can find is either about limit games or no limit games. And I'm wondering if are there any strategic things that we should change when we're playing in a spread limit game?
So what are those typical stacks and what are the blinds?
It's a $1, $2 blind, and it's usually a $300 or $400 max buy-in. So stacks start at about $300 to $400.
And the max bet is 100?
Yep.
So how often do you actually see, I'm going to engage for just how loose the game is, how often do you actually see hands where somebody bets 100 on the turn and gets called, and they would normally be betting 200 or 300 on the river, but they're forced to bet 100? Does that come up much?
Yes, I would say it does, but in the later streets, definitely in the later streets.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It does actually come up. Okay.
I would say off the top of my head, and I have played very, very little spread limit. Okay, so please take this with a grain of salt. But the first thing that comes to mind is you better not plan any multi-street bluffs.
Oh yeah, right.
Because your river bet, you just can't drop a 2/3 pot bet on them.
Right.
On the river. And if you've bet $100 on the turn, and there's $300 or $400 in the pot, then they're going to be getting 4, 5, or 6 to 1 on a river call. You're just not. It's not going to get through often enough.
Yeah.
Is that what you do? Oh.
Well, the other thing this is John here. The other thing I've noticed is that the implied pressure is very much different because in a no limit game, a $75 turn bet is putting a $200 to $300 river bet implied pressure on them. So by calling that $75, they're thinking about the 200. In this game, if you're putting a $75 turn bet, the implied pressure is a $100 river bet, which is quite a bit different. It's closer to a limit game when you get big bets than not.
Yeah. So you're in Minnesota too?
Yes.
Okay. So I mean, I haven't actually played in these games in a long, long time, but it just seems like not bluffing would be a good idea.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that quite often you're not really getting the price for long shot draws.
Oh, that too. Yeah.
That's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for instance, set mining, you have to be that much more careful about trying to do set mining because you may not be able to collect enough throughout the hand to justify it. Or I imagine that quite often, I think people overdo this anyway, but like, let's say you have a flush draw on the turn. I mean, you're 4 to 1 against to hit your card on the river. People pay over the odds as it is, but sometimes you can forgive that a little bit because they've got some implied odds. If they make their flush on the river, then maybe get a big bet paid off. But if you can't get a big bet paid off, then that's even more reason that you really are not getting the right price to draw.
Right. So there are situations where you wouldn't draw.
Yeah. So those are situations where in a pure no limit game, you might say, well, if I hit my club or whatever it is, maybe I can get half his stack. But if I hit my club, I get $100. Yeah, it's not worth it.
That's good. Anything else, guys, on the cash side? Well, I know we're almost at time here. The time just flies when I talk to you guys. This is crazy. But I guess any final words that you want to share on stuff that we've covered, or tell us a little bit about kind of where can people find you? How can they connect with you?
Let's talk about our videos.
Okay.
We have the video series.
No, is this? You guys should be a stand-up routine. That's what you guys should be like. This could be a comedy.
Well, we try to.
We have a sit-down routine.
We insert some humor into we put humor in our videos, and some of them come out funny because it looks like two guys trying to be funny who aren't, but that's funny. So there's value in that.
That's like the meta game.
Because in the videos, Tommy has the hat.
Yeah,
we're two bald guys. Tommy has the hats.
Yeah.
But how do people find you? How do they watch you? How do they connect?
Just go to YouTube, search for PokerSimple, one word, or search for our names there. As Rob said, we got 6 videos out. We're cranking one out this week. This week's is called they go up every Wednesday, like clockwork. Okay. That's our commitment to the universe. And the one coming up this week is called "I Finally Flopped a Set. Now What?" And so Rob already knows this, but we've been having fun with like anytime we're talking about hands, there's heroes and villains, right? So we put pictures in there. So like the first episode, which is called "Value Betting the Turn," when the hands put up, we have all the Batman characters. So there's like Batman from the original show in the 60s, and then the Joker and the villains, right? And so we got a Star Wars set and James Bond, and so we're we put little movie clips and stuff in there, and so we have a lot of fun with the editing of
because we want to make sure, because I will tell you it gets pretty boring watching two old bald guys just talk for a while. So we
gotta throw some color in there,
throw some sparkle in there.
But we had no idea when we started this. We were at every point we're like, okay, there's no reason to stop yet, so we might as well keep going. And we're like, we got to the point where it's like, wow, we're really going to do this. Pull the trigger. Okay, well, people said it doesn't suck. You want to keep doing it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep doing it. And that's kind of how it's been. And now
Yeah.
it's really just for the first time, like now, getting some win where we feel like, we're getting a few hundred people subscribed. We know that there are at least 20 people out there who like what we're doing. So we're going to keep doing it. That's basically.
And you got one of them right here. I mean, Rob is right here. And I've seen him too. It's good stuff. And I'd say, RecPoker Nation, get out there, man. Get out there, subscribe, like, share, whatever it is that you need to do. I mean, if nothing else, is just sort of gratitude for these guys taking the time and coming on our show. But I think you'll like it. I think it's fun. Do you guys have is there an end goal in mind, or is it just we're just going to do this and have fun while it lasts and just see what happens?
Incredibly,
do we have a plan?
No, incredibly, that is our plan.
Love it. Yeah, have fun. Yeah. That seems like a good plan.
Yeah, we are, and we really actually. I mean, I've told Lee a million times. I said, when it comes to my projects, if I don't enjoy it, I won't do it.
Yeah,
it isn't like I'm going to choose to stop.
Right.
I only do it if I'm having fun, and we're having a ball.
And what? Now I know I looked at your site quick, Tommy, and I know Lee. I think you do also, but you guys do some individual coaching as well. Is that part of your your business model?
Yes. Yeah, so basically the two things we have for sale are books and coaching.
And hats. Don't forget.
Oh, and hats. Oh, my God.
And hats. You got hats.
Should I go get one and wear it?
Trust us, we have hats.
we'll trust you.
It's a pretty cool hat.
It's a way cool hat. Yes. So Lee wrote a book in called Winning Low Limit Hold'em, which is one of the great poker books. I mean, it's truly one of the classics. And then I have my books, and we both have our coaching. So if you want to read about our coaching offerings, you go to our individual sites, TommyAngelo.com and LeeJones.com, and you can check out what we're offering as far as coaching.
Awesome. Yeah, guys, check that out. And we just had a comment here from Rick Day, who's down in North Carolina. Rick says he's watched the first 4 of your videos, and they are very good. So we've got a non-Minnesotan validation on you guys as well. So
nice.
Where are you in North Carolina, Rick? Do you play out at Cherokee, or what do you do?
He's just on the chat. So yeah, Rick, throw in the chat where you're playing.
Yeah, Lee knows that area.
Yeah, I used to live in Asheville. So
Rick, I'm going to allow you to talk actually here. I don't know if you're hooked up to do it or not, either chat or you're actually you can chat if you want Rick there as well. You'd have to I'll unmute you.
Oh, there we go.
There you go. Hey,
there you go.
I'm in.
He said, "How you all doing?" is what Rick said. I don't really understand what that means, but
it's kind of like saying "youth guys," I guess. But,
youth guys. Yeah.
But I'm in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and just play mostly home games, bar tavern stuff. I just left the tavern game, got busted out with Pocket Kings, and how about them apples? So pretty excited.
He's on for 8 seconds, and we get a bad beat.
We're not going to charge you for that one. Go ahead.
I appreciate it, but really enjoy your 4 videos. I like they're concise, 15, 20 minutes, bam, boom, and you get some good information real quick that I can apply to the home game. So
nice.
So it's a good deal. So enjoy it.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Great.
Yep.
All right.
Feel free to leave comments at YouTube, and if you have any requests for topics, put them in a comment at YouTube under a video, and we'll see it. And we'll probably do it.
Sure.
Sounds good. We'll put the links. We'll put the links out for you guys out in our show notes. We'll make sure that RecPoker Nation knows all about what's going on if they don't already. Cool. And man, appreciate you guys' time, and you're welcome on the show anytime. Even though you're from California, we still would welcome you on the show.
Yeah,
it's been great,
and we love what you're doing.
Thanks, man. All right, we'll take care. We'll chat later.
Bye now.
Right. Bye, guys. All right, everybody. Well, that is it. Thanks to Tommy. Thanks to Lee, Chris Jones, Rob Washam, John Somsky, Rick Day. Thanks for chiming in there. All right. Well, that's it for the interview. Thanks again to Tommy and Lee. It's always a pleasure to chat with those guys. Reminder, we got our meet and greet coming up October 28th, Monday night at Oedipal's, gathering around 5:30. We'll do a podcast recording 6 to 7, and then just hang out, watch Monday Night Football, have a few drinks. You're buy one, get one on your first round if you are a member of the RecPoker community, even if you're a trial member. So it might be worth just signing up for the trial to get the free drinks. And then reminder, on Wednesday night, the 23rd, we have our Chapter 4 discussion of the Andrew Brokus book. With that, thanks again to Running Aces, our official sponsor, and thanks to all of you who have been engaged with everything we've been doing with RecPoker. It's a fun community, and we appreciate you being part of it. We'll catch you next time.